There's no doubt one of my favorite guests, whether it's on a radio show or on this podcast, is a guy that I can call a friend after all these years. And he's just uber talented. Everybody knows Brad Meltzer, whether it's from the TV shows on the History Channel or his numerous books, especially his children's books, which are great. Now we've got to talk about the Nazi conspiracy, the second plot to kill Roosevelt, Stalin, and Churchill. Brad, the word Nazi is very taboo, right? You say it out loud in public and you're chastised, right? You're looked at as like, I can't believe you just said it. You wrote an entire book on this. Was the research of doing the book uncomfortable?
It's one of those, and I can give you a quick, trite answer, but I'd rather give you the true answer. When you're reading this book, it's about a secret plot, a true story, secret plot to kill FDR and Stalin and Churchill. And obviously that's the titillating thing to say, right? Is like we found, telling the story of the secret plot, but sadly you can't take your eyes off the Nazis when you're doing the research.
Yeah.
I can show you FDR scenes, I can show you Winston Churchill scenes, but every time the Nazis moments came, because they're so horrible and they're so awful, and you just can't take your eyes off them because absolutely 100% they're real. And so even something as basic as like, there's a moment where, how do you find this stuff? So the Nazis used to keep their top intelligence in what they call brown sheets because they were literally printed on brown paper. And they used to lock them in a zippered compartment. You had to destroy what you read after you read it, like 30 days maximum. It was like the Mission Impossible briefcase, but for Nazis. And no one should have them. They should all have been destroyed by the definition of what they were. And the head of propaganda was Joseph Goebbels. And he used to keep extensive diaries and write what he found in the brown sheets. He put them in his diaries, which was so stupid as an intelligence person, but we got to see them. So now you get to read Nazi diaries and find out not just that, we all know the stories that we cracked the Nazis' Enigma machines and knew all their secret codes. And we found that they cracked ours.
Really?
And they're listening in on FDR and Churchill on their international cables. And suddenly, what in any other situation would be like, oh, whatever, that's just spycraft. It's the Nazis, and it just takes on a whole new meaning. So even something as mundane as that, just like where you get the intelligence from, sadly is heartbreaking, and the devastation you see is heartbreaking. So yes, you feel uncomfortable, but you also feel like I want to know that so I can fight it.
Yeah. How did so you take all these people that have a hatred for so many people, even their own kind, as far as nationality, not ethnicity, and it just didn't happen overnight. You have a leader like Hitler that is able to brainwash all these people. Did he do it with force, or just he was the master manipulator to say, one day that person is your best friend, but today I'm telling you they're your enemy because they're Jewish?
Right. So let's break it down to two things. So the answer is no, it's not by force, and that's the saddest part.
Yeah.
So there's a guy in the book, one of the assassins in the book you'll see is a guy named Otto Skorzeny. And Otto Skorzeny is a Nazi, he's a special ops guy, big fighter. And Hitler asks all of his special ops guys, he pages Otto Skorzeny to come down to his secret headquarters called the Wolf's Lair. And you're not in for a good day when the word lair is in the title, right? And you go down to the Wolf's Lair, and he's got all of his special forces guys. He lines them up in a room, shoulder to shoulder. And Hitler quizzes them with one question. He says, "What do you think of Italy?" And they're all kissing his rear end and saying, "Oh, we're going to fight going to fight. Italy's on our side. That we're going to fight to the death. We're going to, beat America," and blah, blah, blah. And Otto Skorzeny shouts above everybody else, "I am from Austria, my Führer." And he's gambling because he knows that Adolf Hitler is from Austria. And a true Austrian knows that deep down you deeply resent Italy, because back during the First World War, Italy took a key piece of Austria and never returned it. And in that moment, Adolf Hitler turns to Otto Skorzeny. He's like, "You're my guy. You're my guy." And he sends him on a secret mission, which you'll see in the Nazi conspiracy. But that's so crazy. We had to put actual photographs in the book, because we're like, people won't believe it unless we show them this moment. And you'll see the physical photo in the book of it's the craziest Nazi story you've never heard. Now, I tell you that simply to say that's on his own side. It's a normal operation. He doesn't make anyone love him. He just knows how to find those people who are loyal to him. And on the other side, when it comes to the German people, there's no force. In fact, the Holocaust doesn't start with death camps. The Holocaust starts with slogans and rallies and propaganda and book bans. And it takes a charismatic guy like Adolf Hitler who identifies these white native-born Germans who are suffering economically. They're just, Germany's not what it once was. Their life was not what it used to be. And that's the magical ingredients for authoritarianism. It's the recipe for decades and decades, including today. And Hitler basically looks at this group of people who are suffering and says, those people are the cause of your problem. Of course, he means the Jewish people. Those people are the reason your life is not as good as it was. Those people. And man, that is the repeat, the code word that we see decade after decade, generation after generation, those people. And here it's the Jewish people in World War II, but it could be the black community, the gay community, it could be the immigrant community, it could be whatever, pick whatever minority community you want. And you can disagree with me on some of the politics of it, but I'm telling you over and over, that's a recipe. And I know there's a reason why politicians like Hitler want to make you mad. He wants to make his own people mad. And politicians even today want to make you mad and tell you those people are good. They're ruining everything for you. You know why? Because angry people vote and angry people watch TV, man. It's a great recipe. And what I hope the Nazi conspiracy is really about, beyond the plot to kill Stalin and Churchill and FDR, is to teach you got to use your voice to fight back. The American dream is not about making money. The American dream, to me, is about when you see someone being picked on, when you see someone being bullied, you use your voice and you say enough. And if you don't, man, you're just going to repeat it. We're going to see the same thing again.
So you use the word recipe, and I was getting ready to use that exact same word and ask if that is the recipe for any person in power to gain more power, is to isolate a group of people, an easy target with a stereotypical background possibly, to focus on a majority group of people, turn them against each other, and you look like the leader and savior of all. That's the recipe, right?
That's the recipe. If that story sounds familiar to you today, it should, right? We are seeing it. And all you got to do, you're not brainwashing anybody. There's no hocus pocus here. The point is, when you're mad and you're suffering, the best thing you can do when you're a politician is take that group and make them angry. Because then you don't just, there's a great scene in the Boys, of all things. My buddy Eric Kripke wrote The Boys and the TV show. One of my favorite moments in, I think it's season 2 or 3, is there's this one Nazi character who says, "You have followers, I have soldiers." Like the people, when you get people angry and riled up at a big rally, they're soldiers for you. They'll vote for you. Angry people vote, and you gotta not be a sucker. Psychologically, it's proven that when someone says something to you definitively, like, those are the ones who caused your problem, your natural instinct is to believe that person. Because when someone says something definitively, we're trained to be like, oh, that must be true. And then you immediately go like, oh, I'm mad at that. I will tell you, I personally go, oh, I'm so mad at the other political side. Whatever politics you have, you're pissed at the other side. Don't be a sucker. That's a sucker bet. Okay, they are trying to get you riled up so you can do and aim you at, like a gun at the other side, because all it does is give them, a great weapon. But we have to be better than what angers us. That's the lesson of World War II. Is we blame Adolf Hitler, like you started saying, right? Adolf Hitler. There's a conference called the Wannsee Conference in the book that we talk about. So it's truly a mundane, boring government meeting. Like on a Thursday, make it up to date. It's like on a Thursday, I'll say. And everyone kind of comes into the room, and everyone, has a file folder, and I guess they pull their pencils from the pencil cup. They sit around the big conference table. But this one happens to be outside Germany. And instead of, you think they're planning paving which roads they're going to pave this week, they're planning how many Jews there are in Europe and how they're going to kill them so efficiently.
Wow.
And all those Germans in that room, it's not just Hitler, all those Germans who are government employees who are just bureaucratically doing their thing, none of them stop it. None of them say anything. None of them do anything. They all go along with it. Man, when you see something that's unfair in this world, you gotta say enough. You gotta use your voice.
Do you think that Putin has what Hitler had in order to control, like what we see in the media? I don't see it. I don't think he's got that it factor about him. But what do I know?
No, but you know what Putin has? You know what he has? It's the same thing. He makes a promise to his people who are suffering there, right? The economy is crapper there in Russia. And he basically says, I'm going to make the Soviet Union, remember the great days of the Soviet Union, I'm going to bring that back again. Mm-hmm. I'm going to bring back that. I mean, listen, and not to get, I'll just say it because it's a fact, not to cast judgment, whatever. But there's a moment where Adolf Hitler says in one of his speeches, he's going to make Germany great again. I'm not saying it to say Donald Trump is Adolf Hitler. I don't need the headache of all that nonsense. But I'm simply saying that it's a hell of a recipe. It's the greatest marketing of all time, right? It gets you riled up, and it tells you your life can be better if you just follow me. And that's, that works for Putin right now. He's basically saying the Soviet Union used to be the greatest power in the world. We had all this land, we had all this prosperity, and it's gone, and I'm going to bring it back again. And you know what? People want that promise. They want their old life back again.
Yeah. Well, Trump stole that line from Reagan. So if anybody wants to.
Yeah, no, Reagan used that line too. Yeah. And then again, I'm not saying like that line is just, it repeats because it's a hell of a great line. It just is. Yeah. I want America great again. Everyone wants America great again. Everyone wants the good old days, wherever you live. Once you get to a certain age, you want the good old days back again. And that promise is what Putin's doing right now. Right? It's what Reagan promised when he ran. It's what Hitler promises when he runs. We're going to give you your old amazing life back. And again, it doesn't start with death camps. It just starts with like the small, tiny things. And then, of course, Hitler takes it to crazy town. But
I never understood the good old days. I mean, we're Americans. We live in a great country with tons of freedom, so much that it gets us in trouble because we have so many freedoms. What were the good old days?
Listen, I obviously agree with you. But I will tell you that there are a group of people in this country where their old way of living, without having to deal with what they say and offending someone and making sure that they're being sensitive to anyone else. To them, that's the good old days. Like obviously everyone has their own definition of it, but that there's a moment. So okay, here's a better example. When Charlottesville happened a few years back, we saw, and again, you said it right there. We throw the word Nazi around a lot these days, and that's a dangerous thing to do to me. But when Charlottesville happened, there were real Nazis marching in Virginia, right? Real Nazis with swastikas, shouting in their tiki torches. And I remember, like everyone else, we're wringing our hands as Americans going, how does this happen here? Again, whatever side of politics you're on, how does this happen in America? That seems like something that should happen in the 1940s or, in Germany sometime, but Europe, far away from here. And when we were researching the Nazi conspiracy, Josh mentioned, I'm my co-author, found this amazing moment in American history that back during World War II, there was a Nazi rally that took place in Madison Square Garden, the heart of New York City. 20,000 Nazis gathering together to cheer. There's a big giant banner of George Washington surrounded by swastikas. The first speaker at the rally says that if George Washington were alive today, he'd be friends with Adolf Hitler.
Wow.
That's crazy, right? Why are we fighting Nazis in 2023 here in America? Because they never left.
Yeah.
They were here then. It's, and when Kanye West shoots his mouth off using his celebrity to, say his anti-Semitic things, we're like, oh, I can't believe a celebrity would do that. Back then, Henry Ford did the same thing. Charles Lindbergh did the same thing. They used their celebrity to bash the Jewish people. So this stuff repeats over and over. And what we do is we take World War II and we tell these headline stories. We tell like a greatest hits of it, that America punched the Nazis in the jaw and we saved the world for democracy. And it's a great story. It's a great Spielberg kind of tale. But we didn't want to fight Nazis in America when World War II happened. No one wanted to fight the Nazis. After World War I, we were so tired of losing so many of our young men in that war that no one wanted to go and fight again. We were an isolationist country. We were like, we're never fighting abroad. When the stock market crashed, it was a disaster. FDR is elected to save the country from ruin, to make the country like, the good old days, bring them back again, prosperity back again. The only reason we get involved in World War II is because of Pearl Harbor, because the Japanese attack us and we say, oh, you want to fight now? We'll fight you. We don't even say we're fighting Hitler then.
And
we're not in World War II.
And the only
we're
reason
fighting the Japanese. And it's Adolf Hitler who declares war on us and says, listen, man, his own advisors, Adolf Hitler's advisors say, don't declare war on America. Let them be. We don't need that headache. And Hitler's like, no, man, strong people declare war. They don't wait to be declared war on. And he declares war on us. And so now we got to fight him too. And it's a great giant, one of his great miscalculations. Winston Churchill says he remembers when that happens. Not that he's happy, but he knows that he remembers this quote about the America. And he says that America, the United States, is like a gigantic boiler. And once you light a fire under it, there's no limit to the power it will produce. And he's right about that, man, because now the game's on.
And the reason why Japan attacked Pearl Harbor was all over tariffs that we imposed on them, correct? Well,
I think there's a lot of reasons why it happens. It's a giant miscalculation by the Axis powers. And the other miscalculation, of course, is Adolf Hitler's belief that when he invades the Soviet Union, that the Russians are going to give up fighting. And Hitler makes obviously many horrible decisions, but those two big ones, declaring war on us and thinking he could take on the Russians, arguably he could have potentially won if he just would have not been an egomaniac. I mean, don't forget, the Soviet Union were on the sides of the Russians at the start of the war. They weren't on our side. It's only when Hitler invades them that they're like, wait, we should join the Allied powers and be on the good guy's side. But Hitler could have potentially ruled the world if he just had a little bit of discipline.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the sad on it. He's just makes miscalculation after miscalculation. That's the scariest thing to me.
So what is which I never heard of until I saw the part of your book title is The Secret Plot to Kill Roosevelt, Stalin, and Churchill. Without giving it all away, because we want people to
let's talk about it, man. So let's paint the picture. This is the moment in 1943, the height of World War II, where Joseph Stalin, the premier and the head of the Soviet Union, wants us to come and invade. And he wants our help fighting the Nazis, right? The Nazis are decimating the Soviet Union. He's like, come and we're sending munitions, we're sending weapons, but he's like, no, you got to invade from the east. You got to help me. And FDR realizes that he has to get the big three superpowers together. He's got to get the United Kingdom and the Soviet Union and the United States in one room. FDR, Churchill, Stalin look each other in the eye. They got to make plan for troop movements, plan for morale, plan for supplies. It's one of the only times in world history where millions of lives are truly at stake. And this meeting must take place. It's in Tehran, Iran, of all places. And to really give you the picture of it, FDR goes to Tehran. His motorcade is coming down the center of the city. Everyone's craning their neck. They want to see the president. The president of the United States is there. And the president's waving back from the motorcade. But what no one knows is that's not the president at all. It's a Secret Service decoy. The real FDR is across town. He's ducked down and hiding in the back of a beat-up sedan, racing through the side streets because they're worried there's a Nazi assassin who's going to murder him. And I just ruined chapter 1 of the Nazi conspiracy. But there's chapter 1 for you. That's chapter 1 of the new book.
That's crazy. I'd never heard that before. I mean, I'm sure.
Of course you never heard it because no one, you got to say, why do you not know this story? Here's why. Because when the meeting's over, FDR goes back to the White House and he says, we had a great meeting. Oh, and by the way, the Nazis tried to murder us. And of course, the phone starts ringing. Everyone wants to know what's going on. It makes the newspaper, every newspaper in the country carries a story. It's a huge story. But guess what happens within a year after that? The invasion of Normandy. 150,000 men stormed the beaches, 1 million more waiting by in successive waves. And at that moment, it's such a big story that the story of the Nazi conspiracy, the secret plot, just becomes a footnote to history until history nerds like me say, hey, man, what's that story? And let's figure it out.
When you go, because I know right now you're currently on the book tour, traveling from state to state, city to city. Like when you go on Kelly Clarkson, I love the rapport that you two have. And you go on a show like that, how deep can you get into this without making people like Kelly or someone else feel really uncomfortable?
I don't know. I mean, this week we've done Rachel Ray, Kelly Clarkson. You can watch the Rachel Ray interview. We talk about everything, so many things we talk about. It's just, Kelly loves our kids' books, so we talked more about kids' books. Rachel really loves thrillers, so we talked more about this because she's like, it's real history, but it reads like a thriller. I don't know. I think you're underestimating people. I think people, no one wants to hear about some of the most gruesome parts of the Holocaust. Of course, it's very upsetting to many people, rightfully so. But hearing the background of why we were fighting Hitler and how we won and how we took him down and why he, what miscalculation he made, and more important, that he was trying to murder the president of the United States, people want to hear that story. And they want to hear that story because, again, we reduce World War II to these greatest hits and we ignore the deep cuts and the amazing parts of it. And World War II is not just a skirmish that happens. It's part of the American identity. It's one of the only and maybe last times in modern time that everyone can agree that America came in, did the right thing, saved the day, and we all agree that, we're all on the same side. Mm-hmm. When was the last time anyone said that about our government? So I think people want to hear those stories of how we did it correctly.
Well, I say this because we live in a time and day of trying to forget history in the past. And this is such a huge part of history, and such a feel good for the most part for American history is that we, like you said, came in, we won and did all these things. But we want to forget, whether good or bad, the past. And you bring up anything negative in the past, even if you can learn from it, the Civil War, the Confederacy, slavery, Nazis, Holocaust, any of that stuff, it seems like we want to forget it all instead of learning from it. So I agree with you, but I'm just
some people want to forget it all, and some people realize, you bury it and you bury our souls. There are beautiful stories that are told by people that look very differently than you and I, whose stories are vital. And if you ignore them, you're ignoring who we are. And I think, what you're seeing now, history isn't math, right? It doesn't just have one answer. History is made up of perspectives. And if you just follow one perspective, you get one story. But if you follow a different perspective, you get a different story. And that's not a flaw. And this is, I know they got me running, in 2 minutes, but this is maybe the perfect way to end it. Like, I firmly believe that, that's not the flaw. It's what makes us beautiful. We're all living stories, right? Each of us, every day when we wake up, we kind of hold ourselves together and we decide what story about ourselves we're going to put out there. And we want to put out the best pieces of ourselves, the part where we look brave, or we look good, and we look like we're kind, and we look like we're generous. And we hold that out and we hide the parts of ourselves we want no one to see, that we're also selfish and quick to anger and we're petty sometimes. And we pray that no one sees those parts of us. And we walk around and we hold that story of ourselves out and we pray that everyone believes it. And to me, that's not a bad thing. It's a human thing. And I love that when you read The Nazi Conspiracy or any other book I write, you become a part of my story. I become a part of yours. Yeah. To me, there's nothing more intimate. I love that.
Well, thank you for the copy. And if anybody else wants it, which I highly suggest you get, bradmeltzer.com, The Nazi Conspiracy, The Secret Plot to Kill Roosevelt, Stalin, and Churchill. Brad, my friend, always good to see you. Be safe on your rock star road tour for the book tour, and we'll talk very, very soon, okay?
Thank you, pal. Always good to see you, and thanks for supporting us in every different medium, and I really do appreciate it.
Of course. Talk soon. Bye-bye.
Take care.